Hi there, welcome to In Parliament. I'm Sharon Tong. Parliament has kicked off the debate on the government's white paper on population. Deputy Prime Minister Teo Chee Hean sought endorsement from the House with a speech wrapping up the key thrusts of the population roadmap, which he said was pro-Singaporean. Setting the context on why the white paper was prepared, Mr. Teo said a series of unprecedented crises, including the September 11th attacks in 2001 and SARS in 2003, caused wide swings which required extraordinary responses to cushion the impact felt by Singaporeans. He said the responses taken by the government threw its planning out of gear and led to growth in the foreign workforce, population, infrastructure and housing not being aligned. So there was now a need for a review. Mr. Teo explained that the white paper's projection of 6.9 million people in 2030 is not a target.
We are not deciding now on the population trajectory beyond 2020, nor are we deciding that we will have a population of 6.9 million in 2030. We are using this figure, which is at the high end of the 6.5 to 6.9 million range, only to prepare infrastructure plans.
He said the government does not want to underprovide for the future and repeat the infrastructure bottlenecks the country is facing today. Going into the rationale for the paper, Mr. Teo said Singapore's ageing and shrinking population is an urgent issue that needs to be dealt with now. Singapore hit a demographic turning point last year when its first cohort of baby boomers turned 65, the retirement age. At the same time, the total fertility rate has been below the replacement level of 2.1 for the past 30 years. If nothing is done today, Mr. Teo said Singapore's population will start shrinking by 2025.
What does this mean for Singaporeans? Higher taxes on those working to fund subsidized healthcare for a much larger number of seniors. Slower business activity and less investment in new sectors, leading to fewer jobs and career opportunities. Young Singaporeans may decide to leave for more exciting opportunities in other growing cities. This would hollow out our population and workforce further. This is a real worry, not on a national level, but for parents too, who wonder whether their children will go abroad in search of better opportunities, and they will be left here, alone, in their silver years.
Mr. Teo said the key priority is to encourage Singaporeans to get married and have children. With the recently boosted marriage and parenthood package, the target is to raise the birth rate to 1.4 or 1.5 in the short term. However, he said Singapore will need to take in immigrants to balance the ageing of the citizen population.
Taking in between 15,000 and 25,000 new citizens each year is about equivalent to having a stable and sustainable Singapore citizen core population with a total fertility rate of 2.1. We, in fact, have been taking in new citizens at this controlled rate, averaging 19,000 per year over the past 5 years. We will review this immigration rate from time to time, depending on our birth rates, as well as the quality of applicants and our changing needs. If we are able to raise our birth rates, we can eventually take in fewer immigrants.
The proposal also calls for some 30,000 permanent residencies to be granted every year as potential new citizens. At the same time, a pool of non-resident foreigners on work passes will be needed to supplement the Singapore workforce.
Some have pointed out that the proportion of Singapore citizens in our total population will fall from just under 62% today to perhaps 55% by 2030, and asked, is this government pro-Singaporean or pro-foreigner? Why do we need foreigners working in Singapore? Why can't we let Singaporeans take up all the jobs in Singapore? But let us be clear. These foreign workers are here to support Singaporeans' needs. Those on work passes are here during their productive years and return to their home countries after working here. Hence, they help boost our ratio of working persons to retirees. But do not add to our retiree population.
Mr. Teo stressed that the White Paper proposes a major shift, a significant slowdown in the rate of Singapore's population and workforce growth compared to before. The rate of workforce growth will be halved to 2 to 3% up to 2020, and beyond that a further reduction to about 1% a year. Population growth is also projected to drop to about half the historical growth rate. Mr. Teo said the government is certainly not pushing for growth at all costs. The well-being and benefit of Singaporeans, he said, is at the centre of the White Paper.
It would be easier and less controversial to ignore our demographic challenge and avoid dealing with it. But we believe in giving Singaporeans the full picture. Take them on board, explain this to them, have the understanding of what the future challenges are. It is more responsible to surface the issues and plan ahead while we are able to do so. We are Singaporean, not just because of where we are born, but because of what we believe in, the values we live by, and a common desire to want to make our home a better one. The plans that we make are and must always be for the good of Singaporeans, today, tomorrow, and into the future.
Some 60 MPs have indicated their interest to take part in the debate on the White Paper on population. 8 spoke today. There were several references to the much talked about population number, which the government is using to prepare infrastructure plans. Key among them were calls to find ways to avoid the need to grow Singapore's population to 6.9 million people. Suggestions included improving work-life balance and providing more incentives for Singaporeans to have children.
We do need to do more to have more citizens, not just by getting new citizens in, but also by getting our people to get married and getting our married couples to have more babies. Singaporeans ourselves can and must respond and answer to this call too. At the same time, can we moderate the flow of immigration as we strive to grow our citizen population? Only within these figures can the notion of maintaining a strong Singapore core make sense. At the same time, we need to continually review and continually enhance the privileges of being a Singapore citizen. This must be on government's radar screen all the time.
I would like to call for urgent action to ensure a stronger Singaporean core in our population strategy. I offer 2 key priorities for the Deputy Prime Minister's consideration so that we do not arrive at 6.9 million people. First, take bolder steps to improve total fertility rate. Second, tap on our own talent pool, especially amongst the economically inactive women and older workers.
There is a national anxiety and some angst, but instead of letting out this national moan about the projected population numbers, there should be a national vigor to address the vulnerabilities of Singapore. Perhaps then we might look at the numbers needed with more objectivity and a renewed urgency to move forward on borrowed time. Our future rests with the 3 keys. The White Paper has stated that the heart of our nation is represented by our Singaporean core. I would like to say that a strong Singapore and a cohesive society, we need a strong heart, and better yet, a big heart.
There were also concerns that augmenting the Singapore population with new citizens and permanent residents would dilute the Singaporean identity.
Singaporeans must be the key ingredient to how Singapore is portrayed to and understood by the rest of the world. This responsibility and privilege must be accorded to Singaporeans, with PRs and residents playing a complementary role. Every few years, Singaporeans must be able to look back and say, my life, my family's life has improved. There is a happy future for us.
Workers' Party MP Sylvia Lim also expressed concerns about a dilution of the Singaporean identity. She said a strong Singaporean core must be strongly Singaporean in values, culture and sense of history, and should be made up of Singaporeans who grew up in Singapore. The opposition MP said the Workers' Party is opposing the White Paper on population and proposed that Singapore entertain the idea of a more modest GDP growth rate, which will see a population population of 5.9 million or less in 2030. The WP's suggestion was for the workforce to tap matured workers, foreign spouses and homemakers.
This trade-off will mean less overcrowding, better integration of newcomers, a stronger Singaporean identity, and less stressful labour market competition. This, in turn, is likely to have knock-on effects on TFR recovery. The roadmap proposed in the White Paper will further dilute our national identity. It will also place us on a course towards needing even larger population injections in the future, which we do not believe is sustainable.
Parliament will resume its debate on the White Paper on population tomorrow. Now, earlier during question time, Acting Manpower Minister Tan Chuan Jin says the government's basic philosophy is to let remuneration be set according to market principles. He was responding to 14 questions concerning the illegal strike of drivers from China of bus operator SMRT last year over pay grievances. Mr. Tan said the workers were aware that they were not entitled to salary increments in their contracts when they signed on for the job. He said employers are free to determine how much they are willing to pay for a particular job. In the same vein, workers are also free to decide if employment terms on offer suit their needs. Nonetheless, he said the incident was a wake-up call and that his ministry will explore more proactive measures to address the complaints of workers from essential services sectors.
There are many reasons why employment-related grievances may arise in workplaces. It is really not uncommon for a workforce of 3 million. Some relate to breaches of employers' statutory obligations, while others relate to contractual disputes. Yet others relate to non-contractual issues such as disagreements over the level of employment benefits or the conditions of work. And it is not always very clear whether the disagreements arise from unacceptable employment conditions or from the unreasonable demands of the workers themselves. I think we often hear of stories from actually both sides of the coin. But regardless of their nature, if these grievances are not properly addressed and they're allowed to fester, it could eventually lead to undesirable consequences, as in the case of the SMRT incident.
The Manpower Ministry is now exploring the possibility of setting up a different body to deal with the non-statutory concerns of workers. The minister said this separate body can deal with such concerns without the worker having to go to the civil courts or the industrial arbitration court. Mr. Tan said this applies not just to low-wage workers, but to junior professionals, managers or executives, local or foreign. Now, Health Minister Gan Kim Yong told Parliament the recent baby mix-up at KK Women's and Children's Hospital is the only reported incident in the last 10 years. Giving a detailed account of how the mix-up occurred last year, Mr. Gan said the error came about when 2 babies were removed from their cots at the same time and were returned without counter-checking their identity tags. In addition to recommendations by a review committee, Mr. Gan said regular and ad hoc audits will be carried out.
KKH Patient Safety Committee will step up its oversight of patient safety and ensure supervision and compliance of protocols by staff. KKH will also undertake a comprehensive review of its quality assurance framework to further enhance patient safety. Madam Speaker, we will learn from this incident. It should be a reminder to all healthcare institutions in Singapore, both public and private, to strengthen their quality assurance programs to improve patient safety and outcomes.
The Singapore Medical Council has appointed a committee to review existing legislative and administrative frameworks for disciplinary proceedings involving doctors. Health Minister Gan Kim Yong told Parliament the move is aimed at optimizing and strengthening processes so that disciplinary matters are dealt with in a fair and quick manner. Mr. Gan added that the Medical Registration Act, which was recently amended, needs to be given more time to be implemented fully.
The medical profession for a very long time has had this principle of internal self-regulation because of a presumption of the need for professional knowledge and professional competency. Going forward, where does the minister see the balance between regulation by external bodies, be they legal bodies or government bodies, as compared to the idea of internal self-regulation by the profession?
we need to strike a balance between self-regulation as well as external oversight. And that is why the MRA was amended recently, I think in 2010, to include external parties who are involved, including a senior legal profession, who will also be part and parcel of this disciplinary and the disciplinary process that's going to be conducted within the SMC. So I think allow the Act, which has just been amended, and many of the cases we see today cases that have started before the amendment of the Acts, and therefore they legally have to come under the previous framework.
Construction of the Southeast Asian Games village in Myanmar is on schedule for completion. Myanmar is hosting the SEA Games in December 2013 for the first time. Giving this update, Acting Minister for Culture, Community and Youth Lawrence Wong said the list of sports to be included in the Games is also likely to be confirmed at the end of the month.
The issue that we tend to face with SEA Games is that the sports list tends to be decided from country to country with the inclusion of some interesting choices that may not feature in the Olympic list of sports. And this has resulted in problems for athletes preparing from year by year or 2 years by 2 years. As Singapore moves towards a more professional pathway of sports development, what can we do as a country, as a member of Southeast Asian and a member of the Games, to create greater visibility for athletes preparing for such competitions in the future?
Within the SEA Games context, there will always be a few traditional sports that will be included, and I think we recognize that, and that's part of the SEA Games spirit. When we host the Games in 2015, we will maintain our same position, that we want the Games to be of a high level, and we will want to have, as far as possible within the SEA Games that we host in 2015, sports that are at the Olympic and Asian Games level.
Now, the 2011 youth participation rate in the arts remains above the national average. This according to Mr. Lawrence Wong. Mr. Wong said that there was a drop in youth participation numbers reflected in the National Arts Council's population survey of the arts, but he explained this was because of the definition of the arts participant in that survey, and it has been changed. Those who participated in arts purely for academic purposes were excluded in the survey. Mr. Wong said the definition was amended to more accurately capture interest and involvement amongst youth.
Is there any concern that some of these arts opportunities become significantly reduced after the child hits upper secondary and starts to face some major exams?
We don't have very good data on this. Perhaps that happens, but we hope we can improve our ability to identify or to find out more information about what youth participation is like.
Minister of State for Finance Josephine Teo says the government has put in place processes to optimize cost efficiency for large infrastructure projects. Projects above $500 million in value are subject to a series of reviews spanning concept, design and cost by a development projects advisory panel comprising senior public officers and industry experts. Large projects are also put through value management workshops to refine their design so as to maximize value and cost efficiency. Nominated MP Lawrence Lien had asked what measures are in place to ensure large public sector infrastructure projects are truly value for money.
Government agencies that undertake large infrastructure projects on a regular basis, such as the Land Transport Authority and JTC Corporation, have dedicated units and staff overseeing the management of infrastructure projects. Over the years, they have built up substantial in-house capabilities in procurement and project management.
Opposition MP Pritam Singh has asked that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs better highlight Singapore's stand on controversial issues such as the Palestine issue. He said this was not only to solicit public feedback but also to remove the chance for misunderstandings among the public to occur on such matters. The MP for Aljun at GRC was responding to the Foreign Ministry's request for clarifications on a parliamentary question he had put forth in January on Singapore's decision to abstain on the United Nations resolution to elevate elevate Palestine status to a non-member observer state. Mr. Singh welcomed Singapore's decision to abstain from voting in favor of elevating Palestine status, calling it even-handed and pro-peace. But he said many in the public may have misunderstood the decision as being pro-Israel because of Singapore's abstention.
In future, it would be propitious for the Foreign Ministry to consider profiling Singapore's stand on Palestinian issues and other controversial issues in front and center, not only to solicit public feedback, but before the public raises concerns on the matter, lest our position be misunderstood, especially in view of our immediate geopolitical realities. This approach is likely to secure greater consensus for our foreign policy and the realities that determine it, for after all, foreign policy is an extension of domestic politics.
We have been setting out our position publicly, regularly, including in Parliament. We will continue to do so and see how we can follow up on his suggestions to further profile our foreign policy issues.
Parliament has passed amendments to the Legal Aid and Advice Bill in a bid to expand coverage and take into account the current cost of living. The amendments will expand the general means test for those applying for legal aid and give the Director of Legal Aid more discretionary powers to depart from the means test in exceptional cases. The changes to the general means test alone will allow the Act to cover an estimated 25% of Singaporeans and permanent residents. This compared to current coverage of about 17%. Moving the bill in Parliament, Senior Minister of State for Law, Ms. Indrani Raja, says the changes are necessary to facilitate greater access to justice by those in need.
Would the Minister elaborate how this minimum threshold income is determined? Why $10,000? Why not a figure which is higher? A third question is why Singapore citizens and permanent residents are treated equally when it comes to the provision of the grant of legal aid and advice. Should not permanent residents be required to satisfy a higher threshold when it comes to means testing?
Taking into account current cost of living, a disposable annual income of $10,000 would be at sustenance levels. Instead of $10,000 as the disposable income limit, I would propose to increase the amount correspondingly with the rise in household incomes and factoring in accelerating inflation to $14,000.
The means test envisages that $10,000 is what you have left after you have deducted your own expenses, your spouse's expenses, and your dependents' expenses. So $10,000 disposable income for legal services is not luxurious by any measure, but it is, I think, accurate to say that it's above sustenance level. Actually, there is a differentiation in treatment between Singaporeans and PRs. Whilst we don't have a separate means test for the Singapore citizens and PRs for the qualifying level, permanent residents are generally charged a higher contribution when they are granted legal aid.
Now, at the beginning of today's Parliament session, the Workers' Party's Li Lian was sworn in as the Member of Parliament for Punggol East.
I, Li Lian, having been elected as a Member of the Parliament of Singapore, do solemnly affirm that I will faithfully discharge my duties as such to the best of my ability, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Republic of Singapore, and that I will preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the Republic of Singapore.
Ms. Lee won the Punggol East single seat with 54.5% of the votes cast in a by-election last month. There are now 10 opposition members in Parliament, including 3 who are non-constituency MPs. Parliament resumes tomorrow. Good night.